Good evening and welcome to Behind the Headlines. My name is Timothy Nyangweso. Tonight we look at the rationalization, the merging of agencies, commissions and departments, especially looking at the coffee, looking at Uganda National Roads Authority and wondering whether the structural adjustment has come to an end. The twists and turns in the rationalization is the biggest concern, especially looking at the revenues that recently came out of coffee, 1.1 billion in revenues. 6.1 million bags of coffee, but also about 83% performance by UNRWA. When we look at these agencies, we look at efficiency, we look at the bureaucracy that was being fought and the donors that were at stake. Who is behind all this and at what benefit will Ugandans benefit from all this? That's the biggest conversation for us tonight. Before we get to introduce the guests and get into our discussion tonight, let's watch this clip.
Agencies in the first place? How successful have they been in achieving the set goals and why are we rolling back on that strategic move? Join Timothy Nyangweso and an illustrious team of experts as we shine lights into the origins and impact of these key institutions while examining what the merger of agencies mean for our nation's development. Be part of the discussion and discover how this strategic move is likely to drive growth and innovation. Don't miss the analysis on your weekly favorite program, Behind the Headlines, this Wednesday, 11th September 2024 at 10 p.m. for a deeper look at the past, present and future of our government agencies.
All on your public broadcaster, UBC, inspiring Uganda.
So that's the gist of our conversation tonight. Will come from the general look of rationalization, merging and mainstreaming of these agencies. Then we'll dig deeper into just the two agencies that really get to the core of every Ugandan. Coffee, that's UCDA, and we shall also look at UNRWA. But things like NITA-U were also mentioned, especially in the NRM Parliamentary Caucus that happened last week on Friday. Let me get to the panel that is here to put perspective to our discussion tonight. On my immediate left, it's always a pleasure having her here. Dr. Sarah Verete, the Executive Director of Center for Constitutional Governance, is with us this evening. Good evening, Doctor.
Good evening, Timothy, and good evening, viewers. It's always a pleasure to be back.
And if anyone had our banter before, I don't think would survive. For the first time, me hosting her here, her made an appearance on our show, Dr. Susan Namirembe Kavuma, who is a senior lecturer at the Economics Department at Makerere University, a researcher and academia. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, Timothy, and good evening, our viewers. A correction, this is my second appearance here.
Me?
Oh, you?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yes, that's nice to be hosted by you.
Thank you very much. When we're discussing efficiency or bureaucracy of how government and economy should look like, Dr. Fred Muhumza, the director of the Economic Forum at Makerere University Business School. Good evening, Doctor.
Good evening, Timothy, fellow panelists, and those of you who are watching us from the comfort of your homes, your cars, and wherever you are.
I saw a clip of you talking about rationalization, I think in 2018.
Yes, we've been on it for the last 35 years. We just gave it a different name. This is Structural Adjustment Program.
Number 3.
I don't even know which number because we've been joining them up. People should remember we closed the airline as Ugandans.
Yes.
We closed the UCB. We closed the UTC, Uganda Transport Company. We even sold out to Uganda Coffee Marketing Board, CMB, to allow in private players. Now, people are forgetting that where we are is a result of the rationalization of that time, which was Structural Adjustment Program. And sadly, we are back in the same box.
Hopefully, you'll be explaining to us what this reverse gear means. Hosting him for the first time here on the show, I was about to call you Dr. Honorable. Honorable Kateshumbwa Dixon, Member of Parliament representing the people of Shema Municipality. Good evening, sir, and it's good to have you.
Thank you very much. And just for your information, again, this is not the first time. And I'm happy to be back, but it's true you are hosting me for the first time.
Yes.
Yes.
So before we go any further into our discussion, I will be joined by Honorable Muhammad Mwanga Chivumbi, Member of Parliament representing the people of Butambala and also the chairperson of PAC there. You'll be part of this conversation in a short while there. But before we get into our conversation, we're going to pay tribute. Honorable Sarah Mateke passed on, a woman member for Kisoro there, but also the State Minister for Defense and Veteran Affairs, passed on during the weekend. Service was yesterday, officially laid on the floor of Parliament there. Burial is tomorrow, and as a team here, we would like to pay our tribute, but also furthermore to General Aronda Nyakairima there, who also, yesterday there was a lecture in his memory. Those are the two that we'll be paying tribute to. I'll start with Honorable Dixon. Your tribute to both Honorable Sarah and General Aronda.
Yeah, first of all, we are still recovering from the shock news of our sister, Sarah, who has been a personal friend and very calm. One of the people that basically was the darling of everyone in Parliament. And I remember her very well when I was involved in the by-election of one of the honorable MPs in Kisoro, who worked together during the by-election of Honorable Kwizera. And I could see that this is someone who was fit into her father's shoes as a unifying factor in Kisoro. And it's very sad. We are heading to Kisoro after this show, most of us, the members of Parliament, to lay her to rest, and may her soul rest in peace. General Aronda was someone whom we all admired. His professionalism, his death was as shocking as the Honorable Sarah.
Yes.
And so there are parallels drawn. You know, suddenly to lose people like that at the height of their career, as a nation, I think we lost a very good and experienced person. This is someone who was a nationalist. He came from Rukunjiri. He studied in Kitugum, and he was a very, very brave soldier. So we pay respect to them, and may their souls rest in peace.
Thank you, Honorable. Dr. Fred.
Yeah, well, I didn't know much about Honorable Sarah, but we interacted very, very briefly. I'd gone to one of the movement caucus meetings, and we met there. The NRM caucus meetings, I was required to do some technical input into their discussion. But you could see a person that was cordial, a person that was welcoming of ideas, and ready to learn and carry on forward with whatever she was going to do. I'm very sure that we have missed out, because wherever she would go, she would garner whatever knowledge is needed to deliver in that docket. So having come from gender and now moved on to defense, I want to believe the experience she had picked up was just beginning to bear fruit into that space. I had more interactions with General Aronda. At times you would even wonder whether this is the army commander or any of the people supposed to be guarding the army commander, the way he would take himself. You just bump into him and casually you discuss things and you chat over different issues. And me, my quest as a researcher, I'm always interested in the things that work best, the systems. And some of the things that work best are computers, military establishments, the medical profession. So you want to learn from them. How do they pick the efficiency? How do they go about delivering the results, defining the result and delivering that result? You'd pick that from a person like General Aronda. And I was not surprised when he pulled off the National ID project. Remember it had?
Yes.
Really done it. And I never thought it would come through, but then I had forgotten this is Aronda now in charge of the space. So my National ID never came out when they were registering people. I said, this thing has been around for long. Still the same talk. And then when they came out, I said, this is serious. The next time round, I had to register and get my national ID as well. But that's the person, and I think we need to learn from them. How do you deliver a result? Have you defined that result? And you must report, because in these military structures, whether you lose or win, you need to give a report. But in Uganda, quite often you'll find people drag, and then you ask for a report, a project closed, there's no project closed, reported. I'm like, when are we going to learn some lessons from the men in uniform? And I really learned a lot from General Ronda. Rest in peace to both of them. It's sad that they die this way, but this also gives us messages on how do we best invest to make sure these sudden deaths are really kind of contained and taken away.
Thank you very much. Dr. Susan.
I also had not interacted much with the late Sarah Matete, but from the tributes given by different persons in Parliament, I was touched that this was an approachable person and quite humble. I was touched most especially by the testimony that was given by her doctor in Mengo, that despite her ministerial position, she could queue with the rest of the patients. And the doctor had to request her to get out of the line and see the doctor. So she was approachable and development-oriented. She had set up a number of development projects in the education sector. And I could tell that she was a rising star. So it's so unfortunate that we've lost her at such an age, the time when she had just started to rise up and become very beneficial to this country. May her soul rest in peace. General Ronda, his death was a shock really to us, the way he died, sudden death. And I had considered him to be one of the most dedicated public servants, committed to his job. And as the doctor said, that he was results-oriented. I recall he transformed NIRA to be an efficient institution. So we really lost him. He would have really transformed that institution that is very important to this nation. And may his soul rest in peace.
Thank you very much. Finally, Dr. Sarah.
You know, it's very saddening for a country to lose people at their prime age when they have garnered so much experience and knowledge, and they're at the level when they could give much more in the development of society. During the EU Day celebrations on 9th May, I shared the table with the Honorable Sarah Mateke, and she was a fan of this show. So she was discussing we were sharing. She was giving me feedback on some of the contributions on Behind the Headlines. And she was so grounded on governance, very intelligent, of course, very humble and jolly. And unlike, you know, most of her character was not known so much in the public because she was not so much into the media, but very practical and grounded in the work that she was doing. The people of Kisoro have lost a great leader. As a country, we have lost a great leader at her prime age. May she rest in peace. General Ronda was a giant in his own capacity, very humble, very intelligent, professional, and one of the most disciplined soldiers this country has had. I interacted with him a lot when he was the Minister of Internal Affairs, because that's our political supervisors, the NGO sector. And he pioneered the quarterly meetings between the government agencies and NGOs. The quarterly dialogues have helped a lot solve the contestations between NGOs in Uganda and the government agencies. And that's why you see less and less of the complaints against each other in the media. That was a brainchild of General Ronda. And he died at his most prime age. I was a friend to his wife. Once in a while we would share lunch. There is a place we would meet and share lunch and have conversations on topical issues. I still meet her, Linda, once in a while. She has carried on, but of course painful after the loss of her partner. We still condone with the families, and may the deceased rest in peace.
Yeah. May their souls rest in peace, and we pray for comfort of their families as they go through these trying times, especially Honorable Sarah and her father, especially Professor Philemon. This is a tough time for the family there. Our prayers go out to them, and Honorable Dixon will be traveling tomorrow or this morning as we leave this place. Let's get into our conversation here. The National Resistance Movement Parliamentary Caucus met on Friday and met the president. A few deliberations were made, but still seems like it's going to pass. Most of the agencies will be merged, mainstreamed, or transferred to their mother ministries. But UCDA became the center of discussion with a 3-year transitional period. That's one of the gists that were there. But why are we going into reverse gear since we went into structural adjustment to be able to have efficiency, bureaucracy, and all this red tape cleared out? Why did we come back to where we are right now? We've come back full circle. Let me start with Honorable Dixon. You, as the Parliamentary Caucus, sat down and made discussions. Brief us on the resolutions that came out of it and what they mean moving forward.
Well, first of all, I think you are referring to the last caucus meeting that took place.
Yes.
But prior to that, there was a caucus which was held some weeks back, and the members of the caucus expressed reservations about certain agencies and the fears that most members of parliament, especially from NRM, had about the merger. And the president listened, and out of that meeting, he requested that he would meet certain committees of parliament to further explain to him, but also for him to make his case before the caucus meets again. And so the committees of parliament on finance, planning and economic development, a committee on national economy, committee on agriculture, we met the president, and the president listened. Especially that meeting was tackling 2 agencies, Direct Development Authority and the Coffee Development Authority. And so the discussions went on until late, and the president listened. Many members of parliament expressed fears, especially about UCDA, because of its strategic role in our economy, handling the #1 strategic export for this country, which is coffee. And so there are fears that were expressed by members of parliament in those committees that the coffee sector being taken to the ministry with all the challenges that the ministry has would likely undermine the successes that have been registered in our coffee, especially the production, the quality control, and export numbers. Some of the fears are not far-fetched because the members of parliament explained to the president that the ministry has its own challenges. And we thought that UCDA, since they took on their role, they've been able to meet the international standards requirements. They've been able to sensitize farmers on issues of quality to the extent that we have seen our exports of coffee grow. And so no one is comfortable with fixing what is not broken, especially given that we have seen what the other exports are going through, like the tea sector, the milk, of course. And so the The members gave examples of the inefficiencies, the non-responsiveness, and questioned the ability of the ministry to actually take on that role immediately without impacting on the sector. And the president, we agreed mutually. He agreed that we agreed to the principle of the merger, but give it a period of 3 years so that the ministry gets ready. There was the other proposals on the table was to create some kind of food, crop and animal administration along the lines of like the Food and Drug Administration in the US or in Britain, to be able to merge and have one agency to control, you know, some of these sectors. So in principle, that was the agreement of the committees, and of course, when the caucus convened, the caucus agreed with that position. So we shall have the bill, and the bill will indicate the effective date. I mean, it will be subject to government being ready. So the members of parliament are not against the merger per se. There are benefits accruing out of merger, eliminating the structural ambiguities, the functional duplication and overlap, etc. We've seen this, and given what the economic situation, the fiscal stress we are having, we need a lean and efficient government. That one is not debatable. And so there are justifications to merge commissions, councils, some agencies. And as members of parliament, as NRM, we are in principle in agreement. However, there are agencies which have been able to shine. Like UCDA was mentioned, UNITAYU was mentioned, and I think UNRA. These are the major 3 agencies within Parliament where almost there is consensus among members that, look, we have seen the performance of these agencies, their performance culture, their responsiveness. There might be issues about whether some of them are fulfilling their envisaged original mandate, which is something that then the responsible ministries would have to act the boards. But taking them to ministries where we have had some of the challenges directly, looking at the NDP 3 performance results, looking at some of the loans that some of the ministries have taken on and they are not performing, looking at the ministerial policy statements that come to Parliament. There are reservations within Parliament that, well, while we support, there are some agencies which should have been merged a long time. But then we must be very, very clear not to destroy our own success stories that are still showing results. And so that's where there is a debate. And I'm very happy that the president listened to the members of parliament, and was able to take notes, because members were very clear to say, look, there is ABCD in the ministries. And at some point he asked us, so should we do away with the ministry? Should we merge it? And the members said, you need to fix it, because you are the one who appoints the people in the ministries. If they are not performing, fix it. So I'm sure that having reflected and responded positively, there will be perhaps other expectations from us in terms of realigning government to make sure that even those which are going to be merged, there is efficiency in government.
You said lean, efficient, and you're talking about commissions, agencies, and departments. Is that it? Is that the only place that we can get lean and efficient?
Of course, if we are, I mean, if you widen the scope of discussions, and this is what we've been saying, there are very many other areas which we think could be rationalized, including Parliament. There has been debate about the size of Parliament. Now we are creating. Perhaps there are people who are advocating for more units. So, how big should Parliament be? How big should be our administrative structure? So, that's a debate for another day.
Okay.
But for purposes of these agencies, we think that yes, there can be savings, but the most important thing is efficiency. If we merge, for example, you look at the councils. We have I think a youth council, children's council, women's council for elderly. All these are councils related to the special interest groups. So why not put them together and you have one council? So there are those which should be the service commissions. But the major fear is those going into ministries.
Okay.
Looking at the current performance of some ministries.
Thank you very much. Let me get to Dr. Fred Muhumza. Doctor, you have had the resolutions that came out of this NRM caucus, parliamentary caucus. And when you hear UCDA and having seen you speaking about especially this rationalization, structure adjustment, we began from structure adjustment. And the headaches there were cutting on bureaucracy. Money was being diverted to not relevant places. There was pressure from the donors. Why are we engaging the reverse gear, especially when we look at the agencies that the Honorable has mentioned?
Thank you. I think we lost the locus, really. You begin to discuss the doctor and you forget it's about the medicine and the disease you're trying to cure. This whole purpose of rationalization was not just about agencies. The whole word RAPEX is the rationalization of agencies and the public expenditure. Now, we should not forget the bigger picture, which is the public expenditure. And that is where the original structural adjustment came from. That you have a very big government budget deficit. Your revenues are so small compared to your spending. Now, there has been this argument, let's grow the revenues. But there is a limit on how fast and how far you can grow your revenues. You need to cut down your expenditure. Now, how do you do that? That focus was lost. That this whole discussion was not about institutions. It was about cutting public expenditure. And in the process, you needed to deal with the institutions. And then you also wanted to gain the efficiencies. That's why you'll see a number of government agencies were thrown out there. And some of them, of course, people became emotional and they lost the locus. So I don't agree that you can just shift UCDA functions and put them into the Ministry of Agriculture. That already is the wrong thing. Because some of the functions UCDA is doing are supposed to be going to the local governments. You're talking of extension service providers. These are local government staff. Now you're going to have the duplication being talked about, that you have an extension officer recruited by UCDA to offer services, extension services on coffee. But this same farmer with coffee has cabbages, has cows, has pineapples. So who is going to support them in that area? And that was one of the areas to say, maybe we get these extension service providers so that we don't pay twice. That the local government has one to deal with the other crops, but the government has also paid another one to deal with only coffee. And this fellow might find these other diseases and say, that's not my mandate. But then remember, when he's also in this local government, who is he reporting to? The director of production in a district cannot even approach him to say, help. But this person is already well facilitated to reach the farmers, give them advice on one crop. What about the other crops? Now, in that process, Uganda is importing basics like carrots, onions from Tanzania. I'm looking at the data. 10 years ago, 2014, we were importing things from Tanzania worth $50 million. This last year, 2023, we imported goods from Tanzania worth $1.2 billion, from 50 to 1.2. And what are these? Not vehicles, not fuel. It is basic things we can produce here. So rationalization was about how do we remove these effects of a distorted government budget on the entire economy. Now that discussion goes beyond UCDA. And the successes of of coffee, you cannot just attribute them to UCDA. I hope your team will find my slide, my one pager, and put it up at this point, if they can find it, anytime they find it. If you look at that page there, that slide there, the black is actually the growth in volumes of coffee. And the red line moving around is the international price of coffee. Now you can see towards the end of the right of that picture, the international price is what has driven the revenues from coffee to over $1 billion. It's not necessarily production. It's the international price. And that's because of issues in Vietnam, issues in Brazil, which are going to be fixed. Now the line you want to keep tracking there is the black line, because that Uganda is in charge. And thank God that you see that line from around 2014, even when the international price was going down, people continued to invest in coffee. So what happened during that period? I want to believe that is the case where you have NADS and Operation Wealth Creation entering into the distribution. So the coffee we are harvesting today was not planted in January. It was planted 3, 4, 5, 10 years ago. So who was involved at that point? UCDA had a role, NADS had a role, OWC had a role. NARO has been on research, National Agricultural Research Organization, of coffee, for the last 35 years and more. So you don't want to ignore those other players and say, all this success is UCDA. You miss the point. Now, this is not to say what happened to UCDA. I think the rationalization process lost locus, as I've said. So I'm not even able to say whether UCDA should or should not, UNRWA should or should not, because we lost the focus of why we should be even discussing the rationalization and where are the bigger expenditures that we should be talking about. Last year I was looking at the publications of the Ministry of Finance. We borrowed in the domestic market about 15 trillion. Of the 15 trillion, 8 plus went into debt management. So it couldn't offer services. Only about 6 was left to offer services. So rationalization was about that. How do I scale down the government borrowing? In this particular budget, 24-25, you have 12 trillion of refinancing, money that would have been paid out if we had it. So the whole rationalization should be saying, how can I cut government expenditure and at least achieve 2 things. 1, I will not need to borrow to pay salaries for people. 2, if I have any money left, I will pay my creditors so that I stop rolling over the obligation. So until we begin to look at rationalization from that bigger perspective, we are going to begin debating UCDA, then this is UNRWA, then this is I don't know what. And there are other agencies that really, I think they were carried along because we forgot function of what they were doing. The UMRA, the Uganda Microfinance Regulatory Authority, should not be sent back to the Ministry of Finance. This is a regulator of the financial sector. And where most of the poor are going, the SACCOs, the non-deposit taking institutions, you are taking it to Ministry of Finance to do what? Who will run it there? We actually ran out the licensing of banks and gave it to Bank of Uganda to say, license them, supervise them, close them when they are a nuisance. Now you can't easily do a regulation of a financial sector sensitive as it is from the Ministry of Finance. So regulators, we should have looked at them differently, especially regulators of these sensitive institutions. I don't want to see National Drug Authority go to Ministry of Health. That's a sensitive area. So, as I've said, the locus was lost. It's my prayer that the 3 years are not just for UCDA. The 3 years and can be shortened to 1 year to say, where did we lose the whole objective of rationalization? This economy, the macroeconomics is not doing well, and rationalization was about fixing that macroeconomics to bring down in interest rates, manage exchange rates, manage prices. When you see Ugandans invest more outside the things we are now importing, and they're investing in houses which are literally now non-starters, and now people are beginning to sell apartments to invest in government bonds. And then we have to import onions, cabbages, and tomatoes, things that can be grown in Utambala. But why are people with money next to his own village growing these things? Now, those are the price distortions which structural adjustment was about to say. How do we get prices right? And one of the prices that was very critical, which is still important for coffee, was the exchange rate. Before the structural adjustment program, there was a coffee marketing board. Farm get price, the price paid to the real farmer. And me, I'm talking about the farmer who grows the coffee. They were getting 30% of the international price, because coffee marketing board would determine. You had nowhere to sell your coffee. After liberalization, because now people would go to the farmers and offer them competitive prices, farmers began getting 70% of the international price, and they planted the coffee, because they are planting for that price incentive. Now, I was computing as we speak, farmers are getting 40% of the international price of coffee.
Back to almost...
So they are going back towards 30% where we were 30 years ago. So what has UCDA done to the farmer? And it's not a UCDA issue. So where is the problem? So for me, I don't want to discuss UCDA or UMRA or UNRA. Let's go back and look at the entire RAPEX objective.
And we're going to come back to that, especially what you've mentioned. We need to be focusing on the public debt. Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi, thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you. It's okay. Dr. Susan, when you hear these resolutions and you hear the submission of Dr. Mhumza, and he gives real practical challenges that are there, especially when you look at the 70 coming back to the 40 where we were at the 30, where are we getting it wrong with this merger?
Timothy, I think I agree with Dr. Mhumza that when we are looking at the rationalization of these institutions, it should be done holistically. And the objective shouldn't be only to reduce public expenditure, it should be broader than that and include the aspect of efficiency. If we talk about taking back institutions to the ministry, are we saying that now ministries are efficient? We need to first understand why in the first place we had to create these agencies as a result of the inefficiency of government. And so if we are to take back any institution to the ministry, we need to first put in order the ministry so that it's more efficient. Otherwise, when the institution goes back, then we'll lose its functionality. And therefore, we'll all not be able to benefit from the mandate of these institutions. So we need to broaden it and not only look at reducing expenditure, but also look at improving efficiency. So the starting point should be, I think we need to do a case study of success stories of UNRA. UNRA has been a success story, and in your preamble you mentioned this. So we need to ask ourselves, what made UNRA perform better than the Ministry of Works and Transport? We all know that if we talk about human resource, most of the staff in UNRA were got from the Ministry of Works and Transport. They had to cross over because of the lucrative salaries. And that is the other issue we need to tackle. Because when you look at the salaries of the traditional public servant and these agencies, they are very wide apart. And so you get staff in the agency being paid what in economics we refer to as efficiency wages, and the others are not paid such wages. How do you expect them to perform? Then you get maybe a staff or at the top, like the ED of UNRA has been very efficient. And those are the case studies that we need to look at and say, okay, how do we transform the ministries? Because the ministries are here to stay. They are here to stay. They have full ministers, they have state ministers. So we need to correct the inefficiency in these ministries, such that when we are taking back, actually that should have happened first, before even taking back institutions to the ministry.
How do we do that?
Of course, that requires looking at...
Because you have said it vividly. Lucrative salaries are there,
Yeah.
but also these are technical people that are doing and they have mandate to be able to execute. Case in point, talk about UNRA. I looked at some of their numbers. Most of the inefficiencies were due to budget shortfalls between 11 and 17%. And also the roads coming from maintenance to rehabilitation to reconstruction was really due to financing and funding there.
Yeah, so we have the answers, Timothy. I'm glad that we have the answers. So we know, because UNRWA has been one of the agencies that has been well funded. So that speaks volume that if we are to improve the efficiency of ministries, then funding is a key factor. We need to give them the resources for them to perform. We all know the story of local governments, that most local governments are there, earn salaries, but they don't have facilitation to do the work, even the extension services. The extension workers do not have the facilities to provide the extension to the coffee farmer, to the maize farmer. So I think we have the answers. From the case studies, we can say that, you know what, we need now to improve the funding. Because when you look at UNRWA, UNRWA has performed very well, but at what cost? Look at the salary structures. And you realize that the cost was very high to achieve that success. So we could have trade-offs in certain aspects so that we improve these ministries. Otherwise, the ministries are there to stay, and if we don't improve the efficiency there, then soon we'll reverse and have agencies again.
Let me come to Honorable Chivumbi. Honorable, I saw you really talk about coffee and UCDA, and you were not really amused by some of the things that were said. What do you make of the resolutions that were made by this caucus, especially to the effect of the people in Butambala and Ugandans?
First of all, I've just left Butambala. We had a consultative meeting. I'm holding consultative meeting across the region. Tomorrow shall be at the chair of the caucus. Tomorrow shall be in Mitiana. Next day, I think we shall be in Chagwe. And then we go to Masaka and other places. If you want to speak about coffee only, I've looked at the numbers. Maybe my numbers were not clear. At the time we were signing the first oil agreements, the portion of what Uganda would earn from oil was targeted to be $22 billion US if the barrel was fixed at 50. Okay, our potential.
Yes.
The money we are looking, where you see you have oil authority, you have all these other things, the actual money the country would earn would be targeted for 25 years, would be $22 billion US. But right now the barrel of oil is at 100 average billion US, 100
Per barrel.
per barrel. So even if you double, so you are looking at a potential
44
of $44
billion
billion US over a period of 25 years. And you could see all this effort, the pipelines, the airports, what you are going to earn from all that is that much money. And you are setting up all these agencies as special purpose vehicles to drive, to be able to earn $44 billion US. With the current more discoveries, maybe the story would change. But if it stays as it is, that's what you are looking for. Now, come to look at coffee. Now, if you have 8.4 million bags exported by the current market price, you earned 1.4 billion. Now, 10 years down the road, you are going to earn
14 billion.
No, you are going to earn not 14 billion. You are going to earn, if at 8.4, if you have 20 million bags as the target of government, so you are looking at about 3 billion. If the current market prices hold, they may go down. You are looking at 3 billion. And therefore, for 25 years, if you earned that money, you would be talking about 75 billion US vis-a-vis oil in the same period that will give you 44. Now, there is also a difference to a person. For oil, for people to benefit from oil, it's a a trickle down. Okay? The government must first get rich, and then the people can benefit. Now, for coffee, for all the problems we see, it has an element of bottom
Up.
to up approach, ideally. Therefore, you go for the best practices of countries that have excelled in growing coffee and marketing coffee. From all over the world, they have a special purpose. You could want to talk about vegetable. I'm not underrating the point of the professor. You could talk about onions and blah, blah, blah. But if you follow Schumpeter, the one who says comparative advantage, you must know your niche and say, if we are a coffee country, how do we excel at coffee? What's the best practices? Is it through a main ministry with all the paraphernalia that look at onions, look at cabbage, and look at everything and everything, where you have a potential of 75 billion US dollars? For oil, you've put in special agencies, special everything. For coffee, you're saying, streamline, take it to ministry. That is, if it is suffering from COVID, it's in ICU. I have an audit report of the Ministry of Agriculture. When you read the audit report, and the audit report have issues with it also, with the scope of what they audit, you would cry if you looked at the Ministry of Agriculture. Actually, I don't want to tell you the results of my committee. We have rejected some, but the rules don't permit me to review until I've presented to the plenary. Some audit reports, but bad as it is horrible. It has mismanaged the goat rollover. You know, you wanted to produce goats. It has mismanaged the tractors, mechanization of agriculture. So much equipment bought, they are in the field, they can't function. Some were even posted there without number plates. Okay? Others bought. How do you buy a tractor without, what is it? No, there's an element that lifts the, a tractor without, okay. There's that equipment that lifts.
The forklift.
No. The lubrication. Yeah. So you buy a tractor, a hydraulic system. How do you buy a tractor without a functional hydraulic system? And you are an expert. And those are the fellows, okay, you want to send coffee to. For no single project, by the way, they have, when I looked at government agencies, they have some of the well-financed projects. They're in the Ministry of Agriculture. I'm making an assessment on all of them. None. Projects that were supposed to be completed in 3 years, they're down 10 years. The financing period has elapsed without functional irrigation schemes. We have pumped money in irrigation. The amount of money that has gone into irrigation of agriculture will amaze you. Where are they functional? As you drive around this country, are you seeing, irrigation you can see, are you seeing the irrigation? So the ministry is itself very sick. It's very sick, is in ICU. And then you want to take your baby for somebody with COVID who is in ICU, say, no, please take care of. You must be crazy. So for me, I don't see the ministry right now having the capability to manage a strategic sector that has a potential to generate. It's a game changer, a bigger game changer than oil. Oil is a long story that will take you, and therefore, our bone of contention is that, yes, the story, doctor, you are right. The success of coffee are not entirely to UCDA. There's been other players. But let's see what they now have on ground and what you want to reverse. So I have a fear, and I'll be honest, the suspicion is real. The president, the other day we were making the oil law, said, you cannot legislate me out of the oil sector. That was on the question of licensing for the oil exploitation. He said, you cannot legislate me out of the oil sector. And I don't know what has happened. If all this civil society today have the information Muhammad has, and maybe I have, on who holds a license now in the oil sector, you will drop dead.
Okay.
Now, you will drop dead. Now, the fear is, if you take a strategic crop like coffee, becomes mismanaged the way they are treating now, give it to I'll be direct here, to Rawogo, give it to Penet. All these fears have not gone away. And you look at some of these agreements that are being signed and are committing a government, and you are like, horrible. Is this being done by the finest of our lawyers? Therefore, the fear we have is that the little success now in coffee can easily be lost. That's why, for me, I find it hypocritical to say that you are putting a transitional clause in the law you have passed. You can't put a transition. First of all, you cannot legislate in anticipation. The Constitution stops you to legislate in anticipation. Even at that time when you have built capacity, there will be a parliament. Come back with the law, saying I've done all my other bit, and then if I'm ready, please give me the thing. But now you are saying, what if government sorts itself out in a year and has addressed all these other challenges? Why not? So what's magic about 3 years?
Okay.
So is the 3 years scientific? Did you have any scientific study on 3 years? Or you sat somewhere with the president, I guess, should it be 5? Should it be 3? How can you run a country like that? Is there any research that they've done? And anybody, I want anybody who attended the court to convince me whether they had any scientific paper presented to them that if we give you 3 years, you would have sorted. No, it was against. Should it be? Oh, that is too much. No, 1 year average. Let's take 3. So you simply can't. That's the way we've been running this country, as Dr. has seen. When you look at the numbers, the other thing I want to end with. If government wanted to speak to the intention of rationalization and apex, should have started from the low-hanging fruits. Start with where the president can directly, through a one-day announcement, speak to the intention. Rationalize government, ministries. You have so many deputy ministers that me and the Caucus sit with, find them in the canteen there every day. Because they have no work. They just have a vehicle, an office. Speak to about government advisors. Things you can sort out on a presidential directive that doesn't need even a legislation of parliament. Then you will speak for the intention. And the government is serious. But this kind of doing stuff, the way we are doing them, I think leaves a lot to be desired. If I'm to be exact, it's absolutely, we are getting a road deal and a poor management of all other processes. That's why we are saying no for coffee, which is now earning these billions of dollars. Wait a minute. What has happened to the fishing industry? What happened to the tea? What has happened to Raya, which was rolled over to the Ministry of Energy at the beginning of this term? And across the country, we are stuck with where Raya stopped is where rural electrification has stopped in the main ministry.
Okay.
So therefore,
thank you very much, Honorable. Dr. Sarah, I think yours becomes even harder. Hearing Dr. Mhumza, hearing Honorable Chivumbi, giving the basics and giving the cream of what's happening. When you look at this whole rationalization issue, the merging, the mainstreaming, let's even take an example of just the ones that have been there. He has talked about RARE. I know export promotion and free zones have also come together. There's no clarity on who is doing what. What are we missing in this whole rationalization?
No, I think the submissions that you've referred to shows a government that is in a free drive. There is no clear focus on where we need to go and what we need to do. The purpose of rationalization of agencies is stated as cutting expenses and increasing efficiency. And the target was 1 trillion 1 trillion out of a 42 trillion budget is 1.4%. As a country, we spend about 30% on public administration. A bloated cabinet, 81 ministers, 120 plus presidential advisors who were all interviewed this week, and they say they've never met the president. So do they advise him? And he keeps appointing presidential advisors every day. How much money do presidential advisors consume? Doing nothing, according to their own confessions. You have RDCs, some districts have 3 RDCs. RCC, Deputy RCC, Assistant RCC. For what function? You come to the parliament, they don't have where to sit. And according to their culture, they are going to create new constituencies as they end the tenure. Every day we are creating ministries, municipalities, cities. Some of them don't even have offices. So this is the direction, and this is the executive, headed by President Museveni. So if President Museveni and his cabinet were intentional and deliberate about cutting expenditures, the Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi has submitted, don't they know what they need to do? The Constitution provides for 23 ministers and 23 ministers of state. That's a total of 46. President Museveni has doubled this number with no value addition to Ugandans, just because of patronage politics. Why doesn't he take his cabinet back to the constitutional threshold if he means business? You come to Parliament, there have been several proposals suggesting that a district can do with two MPs, male and female. We shall have attained gender equality. We shall have reduced this cabinet by a half. And we shall save money that should go in service delivery. Some of these MPs, even if they say some of them meet on Zoom, I watch Parliament because it's a key institution to my work on constitutionalism. There are about 30 MPs in that Parliament that are representing Ugandans in true sense. The rest are doing their own things. You watch their submissions, the quality, the focus, and you are like, we can do even 8 MPs are enough. They would serve this country better and would facilitate them better. I have seen an announcement of that there are new cities coming up. And the Electoral Commission is planning for more administrative units. So does this seem like a country that really wants to cut down public expenditure? Or we are just doing politics and hoodwinking citizens that we are cutting down expenditure? If you look at value for money for a taxpayer, the dormant loans that we borrow and have to service but can't expend, the tax waivers that we give to people who are not deserving just because of patronage, all the wasteful expenditures that we engage in, and then the money we lose because of bad governance and corruption. So if the intention was to cut down expenditure and improve the functioning of the economy, boost sustainable and inclusive growth, don't we know what we need to do? This is not rocket science. But what we are doing is mere politicking, so that when we go for the next election, we can deceive voters that we are doing something to save the economy because of increasing poverty and struggles the citizens are going through. Because why would you target to save 1.4% of the budget and you cause all this hurabaro as if that is the magic bullet that you need to cut down administration costs? It is not. Why did we create these agencies in the first place? The reasons were clear. Cut down the bureaucracy, improve efficiency, bring services closer to the people. But along the way, the politics that caused this debate was because some of the people in these MDS earn more money than the people in ministries. And then that competition, people started lobbying for these agencies to go back so that they can get to the budgets. That is the major drive at technical level. So it has even nothing to do with the citizen. Because if the IGG says you lose 10 trillion in corruption, and you have spent 3 years or more trying to save 1 trillion, why don't you act on IGG reports and save 10 trillion if you mean business? Why don't you act on PAC reports from Parliament and save the money we lose in corruption? Are these MDs the cause of corruption? You have 10 trillion to save. You have 30% of the budget where you go increasing, you go nerare, you go dishing out appointments, presidential advice on standing up and sitting down, and you've never met them. Don't we know what we need to do as a country? I think we should stop hoodwinking citizens.
Thank you very much. Honorable Katesh, I'll end with you, especially some of the things that were said here. I know you elaborated on coffee, how it's a strategic crop, but also dairy. When we talk about dairy, about 2 million liters of milk produced. If you go on the cattle corridor, if you're moving to the west, early morning, 6 or 7, some people are moving along that road. They get to the places and they pour it on the road. Really, the efficiency that is being talked about, the lean government that is being talked about, how prepared are these ministries to take on these agencies?
You see, first of all, agriculture employs a bigger part of Ugandans. So it is a sector that everybody is concerned about. And I tend to agree with some of the issues, except that I made far from Honorable Chivumbi, especially comparing the earnings from oil and gas on the sale of a barrel of oil without looking at the attendant, industries and other things that will come from the oil and gas sector that might surpass what you mentioned. But the key point here is, I come from Shema. It's a rural constituency. If you look at agriculture, for example, in our district, Greater Abshenyi, tea has been struggling. And there has been a debate in government. One of the challenges I see is that government has failed to manage its own successes. And this is a very big problem, because you cannot spend many years giving out seedlings to tea farmers without knowing that at a certain point those tea seedlings will grow will produce tea, and so you need to manage the exports, the quality, and even look at because we don't have a tea policy. We are still breeding our tea in Mombasa in our own facilities, by the way. We visited them as budget committee. The processing plants are not enough. And these are, if you look at areas like Wezu, Igara, where Sarah comes from, I believe, all these need support. It is not a crop that you will move for 2 days to transport to look for a factory. It will lose the what? The quality. On Mombasa auction, Uganda fetches the lowest. I think Kenya was fetching around 8,000. Uganda is in the range of 2,000. So you already have a crisis in the tea sector. Milk. We have talked about export of milk to Algeria. I've been, as a commissioner of customs, at least I fairly understand the international trade issues. You cannot be competitive to say you are going to load your milk here on the seas, take it to Algeria, and then you compete with a product that is just across the channel coming from Europe. your cost of production on the shelf will not compete. So we have to deal with issues of value addition here, even increasing domestic consumption of what? Of milk, looking at school feeding programs, etc. Look at the fisheries. Fisheries, we've been able to recover. It used to, I think it's our third largest export now. But you've talked about beef. What happened to the store of beef? I think we have the Egyptians who tried to set up a plant here. But China has given us an opportunity. I think about 97% tariff lines are duty-free to enter the Chinese market. But you cannot have Ugandans mobilized by the responsible ministry to actually take advantage of those opportunities. I remember when I was the chairman of World Customs in Brussels, the ambassador in Brussels came to me crying one day and said, Katesh, we have received more than 30 notifications from EU about the potential ban of the exports. We have sent this to the ministry, and there has been no response to date. So we had to intervene, come here, talk to Honorable Meria, and do a self, ban and have that one curtailed. In April, I saw the Minister of Agriculture, my friend Frank, questioning one of the projects that was, you could see was being donor-driven, the Resilient Livestock Value Chain Project, which was full of consumptive. The prioritization of the project was consumption and consultancies. And the minister put his foot down and said no. So these are the things we are seeing in the ministries. Not only agriculture, but there are others. You look at the project, you find that perhaps 40%, and I'm sorry, my brother here is a consultancy, but perhaps even
Not in those areas.
Disclaimer.
You are leaving the core objective. And these are the projects that my colleague Chivumbi is talking about. The success rate of these projects. And yet the basics are, how can we increase, how can we mobilize Ugandans to export to China, to export to India. Right now, our Airbus is flying to Mumbai. I understand we are not flying goods. What is happening? So we should be looking at agriculture beyond what we are producing. Bananas, that one is a different story, I think. How do we take our products out? Pineapples, and this is the ministry. So even as you talk about rationalization, I think we should start within the ministries. And that is why for this particular one, coffee, there was a very, very heavy debate to say no. And so what Chivumbi is questioning, it was a window, perhaps, that would give us time, because, as you have said, the parliament is there, and the executive is also there. I do not think that anyone would like to see our coffee sector go down the same route the other sectors have been. So the ministry has a lot to do, and I know that some of these rationalizations, some of the ministers who came before parliament, the appetite to take on the agencies, let's have. But there are ministries where you see even the minister is overwhelmed, and these agencies will go in, and then we shall be around looking. But so in summary, I think that there are fears. Yes, there are areas which should go, but there has to be an introspection in government itself to see, one, are they ready? Two, will the status quo remain at least preserved, or will things get better? But finally, the original mandate and the original intention, for me, should have been the starting point. Why did you create this agency, and why now? Have you achieved the objectives? Yes. Are they still required? No. Perhaps the pressure now on the financials, and the fact that, you know, budgets are becoming extremely very tight, is putting pressure on the government. Because in some of the ministries, what we have seen also is a quarter goes and you meet staff of the ministry saying, we go to work and there is no money, we are not doing anything, but we are seated. So perhaps the whole discussion should be, yes, you are taking them on, but are you ready?
Okay. Let's take a quick break. Before we do that, the number to text us or WhatsApp us is 0709 60 25 92. That's our WhatsApp and a text number. Also, you can go to our X platform, hashtag UBC Behind the Headlines. Let us know what you think, or the YouTube channel. Let's come back after this short break.
You used to tell me that I don't make you happy. All that time you would be complaining. I'll call you every day, yeah, yo, baby, don't go.
You can now get all the Chibuzi out with MTN voice bundles. Call all networks. Kubei Dondoro. Buy a 25-minute voice bundle for only 1,000. Or buy any daily voice bundle of your choice. Dial *100 *21 hash and select daily, or use the My MTN app. When we talk together, we are unstoppable.
In a nation hungry for truth, a world where every story matters, there exists a beacon of trust and reliability. For decades, they've been our voice and our window to the world, holding the mirror of our history. With 4 TV stations and 11 radio channels spanning 27 languages, they stand as guardians of information, defenders of truth. With Mascari Heritage Advantage, they uphold every citizen's right to reliable and free information. Their archived stories shaped our past and illuminate our present. Yet now, as new challenges arise and the world evolves, their mission faces its greatest test yet. Be part of our journey and let's navigate the unknown, uncover the untold, and safeguard our future together. Tune into your public broadcaster, for it is the intersection of trust and truth. Because to UBC, your story, and every voice matters. UBC, inspiring Uganda.
Amannya gange nze Namala Joelia nga ntunda byakunywa wano, ebikamule n'ebitali bikamule byonna bye tutuusaako engalo wano mu kaduuka kange kano. Bizinensi nagiyimirizangawo mu bwakunywa buno bwe nfunako obugoba mu bwokunywa ate n'ensuubulayo akasooda. Naye bwe nafuna akasente ningenda nnyongeramu amasa gano gonna gabadde meereere, era bwe nafuna obusente nennyongeramuuko nempeerayo naye ku baana obwasigala nempeerayo ku baana ku fiizi. Luli mulimu bwe kyagaananga, mulimu bwe nafunanga nenfunangayo nenterekangayo 4,000 bwentyo, naye kati nsobola okuterekayo oba 8 oba 5 bwentyo ku ssaawa eno. Naye luli mulimu bwe kyagaananga n'obutunda ate nga kwolya emmere kuwa abaana. kati ku ssaawa eno bwe nayongeramuko obusoda buki ne nyongerako mu byokkamula byange ku ssaawa eno nsobola okuterekayo nnusu akanaana bwentyo ng'ate n'abaana mbafuniddeko ak'okulya njenyumirizaamu nnyo kubanga yannyamba nali bubi nga sirina naye nenyongeramu neŋŋamba nendaba nga n'abaana bange bafumye kafiizi tebabagobye nenjenyumirizaamuko owulira najenyumirizaamu kuba yannyamba nasobola okwongera mu bizinensi yange nasobola okwongera mu kukamula bwange kaakati ku ssaawa eno ndi bulungi akagambo kembawa bagende mu maaso tebaggwamu maanyi beetabe mu BBM bagende mu maaso bajja kufuna nabo beeyongereko nga nze bwe neeyongeddeko naye ng'okusookera ddala neebaza pulezidenti waffe Museveni tweyanziza ne mukyala munnaffe Zulufa naye mwebaza nnyo beebale nnyo beebale ddala kuba baasobola otunoonya ne batuyigga wonna we tuli ssaawa yonna nga bakufaako ne bakubira akasimu ne bakuyita tweyanziza nnyo tweyanzeege kuba gye batujje wala ne bakyala bannange bagende maaso tebaggwamu maanyi baba bayise nga banguwako tebaggwamu maanyi ekyo kyembasaba naye bannaye Museveni yeebale nnyo yeebalire ddala kuba atujje wala nnyo atujje wala tubadde bubi nga siina yadde omutwalo ogusobola okusuulayo akasooda nkongeremu kabuliramu ekyokulya ne kibula abaana bansaba mmere nga sirina naye yeebale nnyo yeebalire ddala
amanya gange nze tubiyitwa Ruth ntunda mudaala kusooka twaliwo nga tukola naye covid bwe yajja netukosaamu kapito neggwawo yo nekendeera era bubaddewo nga butonootono okwewola mbadde sineewola nga nkyaliko nga ntunda obwo bwe nnina sente bwe nazifunye ninyongeramu ninyongeramu ku nnyaanya eziwerako ningulayo enkota za bogoya ningula kale kedo ninyongeramu ebintu awo nga bw'obiraba kuba bubadde butono nnyo bizinensi ejja kutambula kubanga sente sinazifuna nti oba maze emyezi sinakola myezi ntindaba amagoba oba biki nakatandika wiiki nga 2 ekintu ekyo bwe nakiwulira kyanzizaamu amaanyi kuba nawulira nga amagoba matono tebijja kunkubya puresha nnyo kuba bw'oba obazeemu sente ez'amagoba bw'oba owulira oba ozijja mu banka sente nyingi nnyo naye okugamba nti akakade oteekemu $60,000 kyampa amaanyi nindaba nti nja kumalako bakyala bannange kyembagamba kwewaayo bizinensi bw'oba ogitandise n'obwoba osigazzaako nusu mutwalo gumu gumiikiriza oba oliawo nga Katonda alina kyaleese era kino ekintu Katonda ye yakireeta ng'akiyisiza mu pulezidenti waffe n'atuwaayo sente zino n'agamba abantu bange babonaabona mu covid kambaweeyo kasente kano basobole okwenunula babeere bagumiikiriza ate babeeremu n'essuubi gwe batanatuukako naye nkya bajja kumutuukako oluusi.
Welcome back to Behind the Headlines. My name is Timothy Nyangwe, so I'm joined by Dr. Sarah Birete, Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi, Dr. Susan Namirembe Kavuma, Dr. Fred Muhumza, Honorable Katesh, and we're discussing the merger of agencies, especially the challenges that we've just finished elaborating in the first half of the show there. Let me read some feedback coming through. Hello, good evening, Timothy. Thank you for the show. I agree with Dr. Sarah. We need 2 MPs per district, 60 ministers, 2 RDCs per district, 2 cars for ministers, more technocrats there. This is Eriabu from Chiriandongo district, okay? I see the RDCs already going to UNRWA to ask for fuel, but Kajina has made it difficult for one to get fuel when the equipment is not in the database. You must get more fuel after showing value for the fuel you have used, okay? Good evening, Timothy. This is Christopher Chitemu, from Chitemu, sorry. Thank you for the panelists in the studio. Dr. Sarah has thrown very useful insight in her submission, and she has also really made my night. I totally agree with her submission. Rationalization in Uganda is not done for anything or for this regime, but it's just for survival of the ruling government, creation of opportunities for members of the deep state, maintaining status quo, regime survival, existence of life presidency, okay? Interesting submissions there. I think we are just tired, people in Uganda, in the realm of power and authority. All we should do is have them resign, including the fountain of order. This is just too much to take. Ugandans are tired, and I am enjoying the show. Okay, seems you're very tired. Moses from Mbale, I've seen your message, and I will read these last 2 so that we continue with our show. Good evening, sir. Thank you for serving the nation. I'm enjoying the show live and clear in Ibanda municipality. As the government is thinking about agency merging, let them think about suspending the creation of more districts or cities or constituencies, dropping or chopping of MPs in parliament, reducing the ministers such as expenditure is minimized. And merging should not only target agriculture, it should also have the backbone of the economy. However, much the budget is under budget. Dr. Cliff, this is the coordinator of PLU in Kagongo Division, Ibanda. Okay, I'll leave it at that. Keep your messages coming through, 0709 60 25 92. Dr. Dr. Fred Muhumza, let me come to you. When you hear what you have said about coffee, when you hear what Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi has said, the bashing that Dr. Sarah has given rationalization, how do we rethink it?
I think it's really a big thought, and as I've said, I don't need the 3 years. You need a shorter time, because we know these problems. Agriculture, we all know, has problems. Why don't we fix it? That ministry. And maybe we shouldn't be talking about the Ministry of Agriculture, Animal Industry and Fisheries. And that's why we had come up with the Paris Development Model. So there is a one government concept. If the Ministry of Agriculture does something and there are no roads, you can't get the produce out. If the financing continues at 35% interest, because usually what we quote is the prime lending rate, 19%. But who is a prime borrower in this economy? Apart from MTN, Total. Me and you, when you walk into this bank, you're going to borrow at 30%. Can you do any agriculture? Can you do anything? So if you don't get into those broader conversations, you'll be speaking to yourself. Honorable Kivumbi has raised very interesting things. You will be looking at coffee. It's giving us 1.4 billion. This year it did, because I've said the price is $4.5 a kilo, having gone up from 2.8 a few years back. And it will go back. That's for a fact. But in economics, we don't look at what you export, we also look at what you import. So we have a terminology of a balance of payments to say what is the difference. Now, we are getting 1.4 billion out of coffee. We are handing 1.2 billion to Tanzania to import tomatoes and onions, remaining with $200 million. Are we making progress? So meaning that the Ministry of Agriculture, which we are saying is too risky to take coffee to, has also failed us on the other crops, that if you need carrots, if you need onions, then why don't we fix that space which is the anchor and the backbone of our economy? Because if you fix it, you'll be able now to stop the importation of food, because you'll be able to produce your own food. Look at the export sector again, minus particular commodities. Our biggest destination of exports is Kenya, and we don't export coffee to Kenya. Next to Kenya is South Sudan. We don't export coffee to South Sudan. Then DRC. So I want to come back and open that box and say, what is it that we're exporting to Kenya, to South Sudan, and DRC? And I ramp up the production of that. It goes back, most of it is agricultural products. Our manufacturing sector is literally 60% processing agriculture-related commodities. It's coming back to say, this thing Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi is looking at, the audit report, is very critical for this economy. So let's shelve the discussion on UCDA. Now that the discussion on UCDA has led us to realize the Ministry of Agriculture needs to be fixed. Now, in other countries, as I said, they have made it a Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. So that you have one minister superintending over so many entities, but all of which are critical for agriculture to produce. And he talked about projects. 10 years ago or more, we actually introduced the vegetable oil project. And BDCO was the anchor. Let's add value to our own production. So BDCO is supposed to grow the palm oil and then process it. Now, when I look into the figures of where he came from in URA, BDCO is one of the biggest payers of customs tax. So it's not using local raw materials, it's importing, paying tax. Now that means it has killed the local industry of oil crops that we had, like simsim, sunflower, which is the domain of the Lango sub-region. So this whole conversation should be saying, what is wrong with our economy? And how do we fix it? So I don't want to have a conversation on here is UCDA, here is what. Tea, which has mentioned. Tea has gone down. What is happening to tea? It supports over 600,000 people in this country, directly, and then there are others indirect. So do we set up another tea agency? As I said, the policy for tea has been in the pipeline for the last 15 years. It has not come through. Now we don't even know how to guide that. Maize, where are we? And we're talking of gold. Gold is another, it shot through the range. But we have other minerals, like he said with the oil. Everybody discussed oil, as if Uganda has no gold, as if Uganda has no other minerals. So can we have maybe, as we are saying, the rethinking of government, to say disband the ministry called Energy and Mineral Development and create a specific ministry for mineral development. Because minerals will give us the money we need to invest without necessarily borrowing. So that for me is the whole conversation of how do we get this economy back in order to grow it tenfold. And we can't do it with these kinds of institutions. Tampering with agencies is really scratching the pimple. This patient requires to go back, do complete blood count and many other diagnoses, and find out what exactly is wrong with our institutional structuring and setup. What is the mindset of the people in there? Are they focused? Are they understanding the issues? Or are they just there to earn a living? Or are we paying them, as we've said, and they have no money to work? Because they will come and tell you, I have not received zero non-wage. Thank you for my wage, but I have received zero non-wage, so I can't work. So there are quite a number of things that, for me, we need to get back and rethink. The opportunities to grow the Ugandan economy are huge. But we are now dilly-dallying around the question. Look at UNRA. You have the National Development Plan 3 looking at integrated transport system. So it doesn't matter whether UNRA does the trunk roads. If the farmer can't get 2 kilometers off the UNRA road and bring their melon, that farmer is not being helped. That farmer will not penetrate the internet. So can we have the conversation on UNRA shelved so that we can discuss integrated transport system? And you want to say, how do I now make UNRA support the local governments? Because a lot of these local governments are supposed to have a district road unit. Many of them don't even function. They can't even hire an engineer. They don't have capacity. A lot of things are missing. So you may want to say, how do we reconfigure UNRA and tap into its successes to say, can we have zonal UNRA offices that are going to do the trunk roads there, but also support on the feeder roads, the district roads, the community roads, so that the country is integrated, all fully functioning well. Then we can export, including the coffee. Some of this coffee is going to get stuck because the culvert is broken. Now, how do you solve that? Thank you, UCDA. My coffee is here. But remember, a coffee truck is not a border. It needs a well-functioning road system. It needs a well-financing system. Some of the farmers are borrowing expensively from a bank, from money lenders. And so by the time they sell the coffee, the farmer has nothing left for him as a farmer. All the money is going to a money lender until you understand those dynamics. And that's why I say, for me, I do research, not consultancies. You want to raise research and find the facts. As I'm telling you, if a farmer is getting 40% of the international price, that farmer is going to lose interest in coffee because he's working for others. So where is the benefit of the farmer? That fact needs to come through, get on the table and say, how does the farmer get the benefit so that they remain committed to coffee, which is the conversation we are having. If that does not happen, UCD will have no farmers.
Where is the reset button for the economy?
As I said, structure adjustment program, really, we all realized we can't go this way. Look at your budget. 46% of the budget is debt service. Now, you're not speaking to the realities of what will grow your economy. You are speaking to history. Now, at that point in time, people said downsize, and we did. So we cut down spending. Mr. Museveni laid off, I think, 50 or 60,000 of the soldiers. Today, I don't think that's a conversation you want to take to him. But it was about downsizing so that we can put money into the functioning systems, liberalize, privatize. And these systems picked up where government was inefficient. Now I hear people saying UCB should come back. We already have government banks in the system. The cost of mobilizing money in this economy is 12%. So if I mobilize money at 12%, you expect me to lend it at what? If I add the risks, operational costs, my own profit marker, you're already at 25%. Nobody can borrow at 25% and make money. So when you see foreclosures of people who borrowed, I'm advising others to say, maybe you shouldn't borrow. Think of different things. If this crisis, and the world is saying never throw away good crisis. A crisis is usually what wakes us up. You think you're strong until you faint. By the time you wake up, you're in Mulago and guys have said, your relative signed here. So all the offending organs, we have removed them. But then now you have a new lease. So when is government going to sober up and say, I can't continue moving this way? The debt rollover, which was 8 trillion last year, is now 12 trillion. You can be sure this coming year is going to increase. How do you stop that? Interest payment, which was 6, is now 8. How do you stop that? How do you finance government? How do you allow private sector to be financed? If we don't get that conversation, we will collapse. The system will just simply shut down. Remember the other day, Katonga, what it did? I'm sure somebody was aware Katonga was deteriorating the bridge. But nobody was listening. Kitezi fell on us. You don't want to wait for the economy to fall on you to do the reset. And I think that conversation was masked and overtaken over under rationalization. When rationalization began, it was looking at those risks and threats and saying, can we wake up? Now, we took it into another conversation. These guys are earning more than me. Let them bring it here. Even if you take UNRWA back into the ministry, my doubt is the donors who put money into UNRWA are not going to put it into the ministry because they have trusted the UNRWA system. If you go into the ministry, the politics is different. So some of these donors will pull back. Now, what do you do? That's why I'm saying we need to use the 3 years, and I wish it is shorter, so that by 3 years, we are ready into implementation. And rethink the entire discussion on how do we make the government grow. Katonga Bridge really is in abeyance. Karuma Bridge, we are thinking. Seziba Bridge is... So where is the country if your bridges can't allow you to transact?
Nyamwamba busts its banks. Dr. Susan, let me come to you. What are Ugandan, especially let's talk about coffee that Honorable Mwanga is interested in. 1.7 households interested in this, about 60 to 80% of the population in agriculture there. What a Ugandan cares about is purchasing power. How can rationalization put that in the hands of an ordinary Ugandan?
Rationalization should aim at promoting efficiency of institutions. And those are some of the gains we've got from these institutions because they are more efficient than the ministries where they were got from. And so it's important, even UCDA, to be more efficient and address the constraints that farmers face, right from the gardens in terms of the diseases, the pests, post-handling, value addition. So the institutions should be responsive to the needs of the citizens and address the constraints so that they can increase production, they can increase productivity, and in so doing that, they will be able to increase the profit margins. Because farmers are private individuals interested in profits. And the more profits they make, the more they will continue to produce, which is beneficial to the country because we know coffee is a major export earner. So much as the incomes go to households, even government gets the foreign exchange that it needs to transact business at the macro level. So institutions should be efficient and aim at addressing constraints that farmers face. And the ministry also should wake up. And I'm glad my colleagues have mentioned that we need to improve, improve the efficiency of the ministries. And actually, I feel very sorry for institutions that are being taken back to the ministries because they're going to find a whole lot of problems. And so we need to look at the efficiency of these ministries and put politics aside and try to look at the technical efficiency, the allocative efficiency. And at one time, I had the president had suggested to provide contract-based, results-oriented contracts, such that people are accountable to certain outcomes and outputs, so that we can really improve the efficiency of these ministries because they are here to stay. And the institutions the agencies that are going to ministries, they will soon die. And then we'll go back and prefer to have more agencies. But also we need to know that ministries, when we talk about government architecture, we have ministries, we have departments as well. So we need to have this conversation on how we can make departments be at the same level with the agencies. I think at one time we appraised agencies more than the departments and downplayed even the ministries. So we need to have that conversation. Now that we have realized that these agencies have led us to the bloated public expenditure, we want to minimize that. How do we do that? So we must make sure that where we put our resources, they are efficiently utilized so that we don't have to create more institutions. But also we also need the discussion on the savings that we are going to make from rationalizing these institutions. Where are we going to put that money? We need
and that's the question I needed to ask you. How do we get value for that 1 trillion, and especially if they're saving it for what? To do what?
It must be put in public service, especially human capital. And human capital means health and education, but also infrastructure, because these are the infrastructures or public goods that promote the economy, that improve the performance of the economy. The greatest asset that a country has, it is its human resource. So we need to invest in that. So for me, I would prefer that if that money can be put in health, in education, and infrastructure, because the infrastructure helps everybody. It helps the private guy who is in Kampala, it helps the farmer because you have to link the production centers with the market. Human capital will produce people, extension workers, if they can be facilitated to help the farmers, because most of the farmers that we have are not trained. They just do agriculture as a way of life or survival. So they need these extension services so that they can maximize their output, so that they can produce quality products. If you want to penetrate the international markets, they need to be educated and sensitized on how we can have quality standards for our products that we are going to export.
Thank you. Honorable Chivumbi, let's put, like Dr. Susan said, the politics aside. How do we fix these ministries to receive these agencies?
Actually, you are wrong. You have to first address the politics and the political economy. Why I differ with most economists that I've interacted with, they feel they can hold the stick on one hand and not with both hands. That Uganda's problems can be discussed exclusive of the bigger political question. For instance, I've been studying the expenditures. Those of you who want to know where money, there are big hypes, stripes in expenditure. One of the key sector is defense and security. And you have a peace dividend of lack of war internally. So why would the internal Minister of Internal Affairs budget increase in the last 4 years, by the way, from 300 billion to now nearly 1 trillion? Has anybody addressed what is pushing that budget? What? When you have no conflict. For UPDF, it is understandable. But now I'm speaking about Ministry of Internal Affairs, and I'm actually addressing only the police budget. It has gone from about 3 billion to nearly 1 trillion. The wage of UPDF, wage bill of UPDF, has gone from about 400 billion to nearly 1 trillion wage. So are you having a war? So what justifies that hype in wage? I'm not actually thinking people have a good research on the hemorrhage of government. Why must you constantly maintain? Because you can't be buying equipment every year, even if it's for home. Once you buy fixed asset, but you have a constant budget on equipment, on security, underclassified, and nobody looks at it. The other day I questioned, there was a classified asset the state wanted to acquire. They signed a contractual obligation, an outlay of 1.9 trillion every year. I kept track of it. I realized that the contract period had expired, but the same figure had appeared in the budget. Then I asked them, I said, oh, now somebody has looked at it. Do you know what was said? The same amount of money, without a dot, was put on retooling. So I said, how can a contractual sum be equal to a retooling capacity within? So it's a question of nomenclature on how to get money and spend it. Now, those are the bigger issues. He's talking about debt management. There is no way. 4 years ago, I wrote a minority report. I said, actually it was 2021, I think. I said, can we stay still with this budget for 3 years? By the way, our revenues have done well. Incidentally, we have had a consistent raise in revenue. Now, it is only crazy that you are earning more money, but at the same time, you are incurring more debt. Even at a personal level. How can you be earning more and you are borrowing more? So we said, can't we fix this economy? Don't even distort expenditure of government. Just fix it for 3 years. Address the question of debt rollover. The small money you get, roll over the debt and rebalance the interest and even the money you've rolled over to a smart economics. 3 years down the road, you would have had a net of 5 trillion. Instead, you are now going to 16 next financial year. Had you done the smart thing then, you would have rolled over. That's why, and the question is, whose money are you rolling over? We must ask, who is in Uganda? For example, you are speaking about a country that has a capacity to default on domestic debt of 10 trillion. 10 trillion. You are failing to pay for goods and services you consume by your providers. Then the other question is, which I'm asking people on UNRWA. People are equating UNRWA to a procurement agency. That's the argument. That all UNRWA does is a procurement. But slowly, UNRWA has been building capacity. in road construction, training engineers, training everywhere. The people who are making our roads, when I went to China with the speaker, Rebecca Kadaga then, and this RCC, is it RCC? Some of the Chinese companies, they are state companies. Now, should you have made UNRWA back to a desk in the Ministry of Finance, or I would cleverly think of a way I can move it in, give it capacity to stand alone, and you can be a major player in the road construction. There is all economics about road construction, because that's where real money is. Do you have local capacity in there? Now, you are now going to take it back to reduce it to procurement. And what is doing, I believe some of these policies are also pushed by donors. Because see what is going to happen? Increasingly, you are going to crowd the local player out of the road construction. With UNRWA going, the small capacity you've built, you are simply going to have foreigners doing all the roads in the country. With UNRWA, you could have, and this business is alive not only in Uganda, but in the region. In Congo, South Sudan, there is a need to build roads. So how are you playing as a country? What role should UNRWA have done? Do you roll over and now turn it into a small desk in the Ministry of Works? I believe you can think through. The same applies to coffee. The other day, the president consistently has been speaking about the bottlenecks. And one of the bottlenecks is value addition. Does the transfer of UCDA and merge it and take it to the ministry
of Agriculture
answer the question of value addition?
Value addition and quality.
Value addition and quality. Because saying you don't want to export raw material. Are you speaking at a strategic level? So the question is, how competent is Uganda being run? That's why for her, she doesn't want to answer that question. The question is, and I must face you, this camera, do we have adequate competence in the running of this government at present? They don't want to speak about URA. Would anybody imagine that you can now roll URA and become a desk in the Ministry of Finance? They will tell you no. They will tell you, but they will quickly say, no, with UNRWA, please run. I'm a strong advocate, by the way, of a lean, efficient government. And I'm one of the people who really spoke candidly about the need to merge, but not holistic. You must be very careful how you go about it. There are small things that you can easily touch and match, but there's where you have a critical need as a country, and to put your best. He's talking about minerals. Not only minerals, water transport. When you have Lake Victoria all around you, and you're busy fidgeting with the bridges, then the quicker routes to those areas is on the lake. It's not on land.
And Tanzania is targeting.
It's not the quicker route to go around Uganda, by the way, is not. Do you have, there is a railway line, okay, buried between Ruzira and this after Natete, where there is a German thing, where the German donated us a railway station, Narukolongo. Now, Tanzania Rail Corporation offered Uganda. I was in Tanzania. They offered, I think Caucus were with you. They offered, maybe by that time I had not done it. They offered to construct. Actually, not to construct. You just have to undo that railway line. And you can move your cargo from Mwanza to Port Bell here, straight to here. But you are now putting a hotel at Port Bell. Now, you're asking yourself.
What I remember, for example, in Parliament, when the debate about UNRWA came, the minister was overwhelmed, and he actually moved to withdraw the bill to bring amendments in the UNRA Act to make it take the direction you are talking about of being a national, construction company, strengthen it to do actually the role that was envisaged to have, for which it was created. I think that's why I think that there is a need for us to go back and say, okay, do you just disband, do you not take it to the ministry? What will happen? Or do we go to the actor and say, look, if you are choosing your being a procurement agency, who has made you such? Can we give it the strength and let it operate? If you say, the minister was saying that they are technical, let us reconfigure it, but not lose the effectiveness, the competencies they have got, and let them play a major role in the construction sector. Because the value chain in the construction sector, it's like tourism. It reaches everybody.
Okay. As you conclude, Honorable
So as I conclude, the rationalization is okay. But I believe it has suffered which the academicians are cutting because of intellectual cowardice a little bit. Because, and that's another liberation. Can we liberate our intellectuals to substantively make these debates without fear of some repercussions? Because the biggest group you have to liberate, by the way, are our thinkers. They are all under captives. Because most of them, and I can tell you how they lost it, the academician, most of them became consultants of government. And therefore, they fear to use, and that's the lucrative part of it, of their career. Now, they cannot criticize. There was one professor who used to speak so nicely. He was made a lecturer in Chimaka, and we completely lost him. I've not heard him write anything or say anything. I feel when you bring back the other, so can we liberate, for me these are the critical spaces, can we liberate the thinking? Now there is his group, the Saras, are blackmailing parliament.
Really?
Yes. They are giving a picture that what is rotten in Uganda is the institution called parliament. Even if we put you there, Sarah, as an MP and bring a professor here, and bring a doctor here, and all of us go, in the DNA of Ugandans political architects, you will not make a difference.
Okay.
Yeah. So, for example, you will not make, I can bet you will not make a difference.
Let's
because
reduce the size.
That's
no,
not coming.
no. Even the question of size. Yes.
When I was
As you conclude, Honorable.
Now, the question of reducing size
yes.
of governments across board
Yeah.
should be debated. And should debate the political reasons why you have created a huge parliament. How it has come about. Now, you are dealing with the population figures which have come up. Can you take advantage of them? Can we now cut constituencies in accordance with the population demography? Do you know what is happening? They are hiding the official population data, figures, because the Electoral Commission cannot be moved on provincial
results, and they have finished the demarcation.
Yeah, and they are now saying we are done with the demarcation.
Okay.
So now that level of corruption by the UBOS and the UBC, does this professor speak about them?
But UBC is not part of this one.
Do they speak about
Oh, you meant UPC.
So that's why for me, from the point where I sit, even with coffee, even UCDA has issues on ground.
Okay.
And when you go to address issues on ground of UCDA, there are quite many. The question is, you should have... I don't see those problems of UCDA now being addressed in the main ministry. Not at all.
Thank you. Dr. Sarah, you have had the panelists here, but also when you see this law come out, how do you see it play out, and what happens to ministries and agencies? Or shall we see what we're already seeing with URA, and there's another agency on top of it?
Let me start from the right side of it. You know, the NGO Bureau was rationalized back to internal affairs. So now you have NGOs, police, prisons. so in one of our engagements, somebody commented that now the suspect has been properly positioned. So when you have such a structure, for us as a sector, if I may speak specifically about the NGO Bureau rationalization, we lost two components of the Bureau that were useful in our shrinking context: the NGO board and the adjudication committee. These were mechanisms of redress. Now the only mechanism of redress we are remaining with is court. CCG versus Attorney General. You are not even positioning the real people that have violated the NGOs. So we have lost that mechanism that was helping in the regulation of the NGO sector. When you look at our, part of the coffee debate is, the balance of trade payments. NGOs contribute to remittances and the forex inflow in this country. During COVID, it's the only time government admitted that inflows to NGOs had helped stabilize the currency, because it was part of the main forex inflows that the country remained with. So now if you line up our foreign exchange earnings as a country, gold comes in number one, which we don't process as a country. And I don't know whether it's properly certified, where it comes from and who is bringing it. Then you have coffee. But not far from these two giants, you will have remittances of our citizens working abroad. So when you tamper with coffee, because gold, we are not sure whether it can continue to flow when it is not ours. When you tamper with coffee, you find a country that is likely to bank its foreign exchange earnings on exporting human beings as a country. When you look at families dependent on coffee, you look at household incomes, there is always a talk of, inclusion in the economy. The 38% Ugandans that are out of the economy.
Of the money economy.
Yes, you look at families dependent on coffee. I know that 70% of Ugandans depend on agriculture, and they bring in 20 to 25% of GDP. Even that should be a headache for our political leadership to say, how can majority Ugandans contribute minimum GDP? Because now 70% contributes 20 to 25. That should be the headache of the leadership. Not struggling to even take away that 20 to 25. So we shall find ourselves in the near future, if this trend is not stopped, that 70% of Ugandans maybe contribute 10%. And then you have the human beings that we are exporting, kadamas and others, being the major source of foreign exchange earnings. Is this a country you want to live in? Why don't we make sure that every citizen adds value and their income is captured as part of GDP? This 70% suffocating under 20% GDP. Why don't we liberate them under economic, sustainable growth and inclusion? If that was the debate, citizens would feel represented by the political leadership. But instead we are debating and coordinated things. And even when we ask Parliament passed a law on fuel monopoly, I don't know whether we could even go beyond the first cargo, where we smuggled the cargo and Mombasa held the goods. That is the level of incompetence of the executive. And before we knew it, the ministry wrote letters now to other petroleum companies, please bring fuel to to shield the corruption and stop the fuel shortage that would affect the economy. But also our prices keep going up. So can the executive tell us, what have we benefited from that fuel monopoly? And have we recovered that cargo that was held in Mombasa? So if you have this level of incompetence, why don't you leave the fewer agencies that are adding value to this country and serving Ugandans? Why are you tampering with them? Yet you know the challenges you have of incompetence and bad governance.
Okay. Let me read some feedback so that I give you parting shots there. Let me start with this one here. Thank you, Timothy, for the show. Dr. Mhumza is one of the best economists, but carrying out research, he has failed to know that UCDA's merging is targeting a few people. Special thanks to Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi. This is George from Bugwere. Okay. Good evening, the viewers and Timothy. My issue is nothing but can this country be transformed before our country goes to the dogs, especially the value system of money? How can one graduate from the university after finishing lack a job? He or she spends millions doing schooling, does tuition paying, gets knowledge, and then pays for ignorance. I think we should have a welfare state. The remaining things are just a gamble. This is Caleb from Kanungu. Okay. Last two. This is someone, Henry from Kabanyoro. Thank you for the presentation. To achieve rationalization, let government invest in the actual shareable quality data, which all agencies must use to direct any decision. The country is investing in things that do not help growth of the country, the mindset of the people, and key positions, enriching just a few people and families there. Finally, thank you, Timothy, for the show. The current government is frustrated with Ugandans by targeting to destroy cooperatives. While in the Bush War, when they came to power, the coffee export trade revenue is owned by just a few people, linked to the top leaders and the value chain. Reduce corruption at Parliament. Minister of Finance should stop signing loans which are made redundant. I am Charles, a teacher who teaches under the Ministry of Education, but education quality is under Directorate for Education Standards, and the judge of our education is UNEB. Very lengthy there. A lot of messages coming through. We appreciate all of them that have come through. But let me give the panel here parting shots, a minute each. I'll start with Dr. Honorable Chivumbi, Dr. Susan, Dr. Fred Muhumza, and finally Honorable Katesh. Over to you, Doctor.
I think it's important to make the economy work for Ugandans. Our income inequalities, our income inequality is increasing. We are now at 0.48 coefficient, where you have now that disparity. And it is not likely to be reversed with this kind of thinking. Like some author said, you cannot, try to solve a problem with the same intention that created it. So we need to overhaul the economy and create mechanisms that would serve to uplift citizens out of poverty, create sustainable growth, but also reduce income inequality in this country. These are the proposals we need to front. We have politicians who keep selfishly think for themselves because they have the advantage of sitting on the table. And maybe the message is out there for citizens to know that they're on their own.
Thank you. Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi.
If I were in a position of leverage like Dr. Muhumuza, if any economist is serious, one would have thought the biggest discussion would be on the money we already have that we cannot utilize. You have 14 trillion borrowed and dispersed. When I looked into the consolidated accounts of government, agencies are sitting with billions of shillings, both on dollar accounts and on shilling accounts, and these monies are not utilized. When you go to Bank of Uganda, to the doctor, you know what agencies are doing? If in a financial year they can't finish their money, especially these ones that are in construction, they put up that other account where they hide it so that it's not taken back. We want to go after that money. How much money is on that account? where agencies in a financial year have zero capacity to absorb the money given to them. They steal on that money for 3 years. It is there in the Bank of Uganda. Therefore, for me, those are low-hanging fruits that you could tackle quickly. And 14 trillion borrowed, you are paying interest of almost, what's the interest it's going to be 80 trillion. 14 you don't utilize. That's an emergency in another country. A serious caucus chair would have been interested to engender that discussion and say, no, not this other diarrhea. So for me, there are crisis points that we need to tackle. All of us across the board, including Sarah, members of parliament, me and Katesh have been in the budget committee, and I also sit on the finance committee of parliament. There is a lot. For example, doctor, can you believe we got a grant, okay, through the World Bank of $217 million under Ministry of Gender and Finance. When I interacted by the agency, out of $217 million, only 35 under group projects is going to be actual ownable money. The rest of this money is going to be eaten into cham-cham. Now, with that kind of laziness and the forces that when I stepped on it like this, if I tell you every office was ringing, my small office saying, every powerful person would ring the speaker and say, can you speak to the chairman of the committee, not to tamper with, but how do you, a grant for women? The rest is going to be in a competition, in where.
Honorable, allow me to move on to Dr. Susan. Dr. Susan, over to you, your minute.
Yes, my last words is that I'm happy that we have this discussion on the rationalization of agencies, mainly with the objective of reducing public expenditure, which should continue and be stretched to the entire cabinet and also parliament, so that we reduce the public expenditure so as to deal with the huge fiscal deficit that we have that eventually curtails the growth of this country. And I only pray that in this discussion we'll also include government efficiency, because we have these ministries which must be efficient for us to allocate our resources efficiently, the meager resources that we have, so that the economy can benefit and Ugandans can benefit from the services of all these ministries. So after we've talked about saving money, we also need to talk about improving the efficiency of our resources.
Thank you very much. Dr. Fred?
I think it would be unfair to live here without mentioning the word corruption and the political economy you talked about. And people think corruption is really the money that gets stolen. Corruption is also the distortion of the entire policy making process, the design, which project do you put where. All these monies he's saying that people borrowed. They did not borrow to do those projects. They borrowed to get ready to eat the money, as he's saying. 217, you want to do other things. So from the beginning, people's minds are distorted from the development agenda. And so you're not going to develop, it doesn't matter which money you have to make progress. If you have the mindset of the people supposed to be championing the development agenda, are really thinking on their own different things. And that for me is why we are saying what is wrong with the Ministry of Agriculture. And you can list any ministries. It's not just agriculture, it would be so many. So we are victimizing agencies for a problem that is not of their own. It will be so difficult to expect government to rethink of its own self. A patient can't say, I'm going to operate myself. That decision is left to another party. So we have a bigger conversation, and we need to continue with these conversations. But let's be realistic to ourselves. The politics is not right. It has created a civil service that is not right. And that same civil service cannot fix its own problem.
Thank you. Lastly, Honorable Katesh.
Well, what do we do? First of all, I think I strongly agree that some of the loans we are taking on, projects are supplier driven. And therefore, the core purpose is not being felt. We've gone through reports at Parliament, we see. So that is, if you have borrowed 100 million, for example, to construct a house, but 70 out of that is going into non-brick and mortar, then you don't expect, you will pay back, but it will be very costly. Number two, when we talk of efficiency in development, we are going to launch, government is launching National Development Plan, NDP 4, very soon. The question we've been asking, we went through NDP 2, some targets were met, largely were not met. We went to 3, same, and now we are rushing to 4. No one has gone back to look at how do we fix this. If we are talking of rationalization, even with the NDP National Development Plan, we should have actually realigned the government to think sector according to the, realign into development programs. But it seems like that one was put in the sheriff. So you still have siloism, no interconnectedness of ministries, and that's why we still have a budgeting challenge. Because when you are looking at a ministry that should be foregoing its activities in order to support another ministry, so that we generate more value for the economy, it does not actually come. And so I feel that we are going through the cycle, and the unfortunate bit is that the people whom we expect to be advising, the technical people whom we expect to be advising and saying the truth, they will go into conferences and say everything is okay. But when we meet in committees in Parliament and we ask questions, they cannot answer.
Okay.
So,
thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming through and being able to discuss such pertinent issues. We'll end it this way. Give me 6 hours to chop a tree. I will spend 4 sharpening the axe. Good morning.
Amannya gange nze Namala Joelia nga ntunda byakunywa wano, ebikamule n'ebitali bikamule byonna bye tutuusaako engalo wano mu kaduuka kange kano. Bizinensi nagiyimirizangawo mu bwakunywa buno bwe nfunako obugoba mu bwokunywa ate n'ensuubulayo akasooda. Naye bwe nafuna akasente nengenda nga nnyongeramu amasa gano gonna gabadde meereere, era bwe nafuna obusente nennyongeramuuko nempeerayo naye ku baana obwasigala nempeerayo ku baana ku fiizi. Luli mulimu bwe kyagaananga, mulimu bwe nafunanga nenfunangayo nenterekangayo 4,000 bwentyo, naye kati nsobola okuterekayo oba 8 oba 5 bwentyo ku ssaawa eno. Naye luli mulimu bwe kyagaananga n'obutunda ate nga kwolya emmere kuwa abaana. Kati ku ssaawa eno bwe nayongeramuuko obusooda buki nenyongerako mu byokkamula byange, ku ssaawa eno nsobola okuterekayo nnusu 8 bwentyo ng'ate n'abaana mbafuniddeko ak'okulya. Njenyumirizaamu nnyo kubanga yannyamba nali bubi nga sirina naye nenyongeramu nendaba nga n'abaana bange bafunye kafiizi tebabagobye, nenjenyumirizaamuuko. Owulira, najenyumirizaamu kuba yannyamba nasobola okwongera mu bizinensi yange, nasobola okwongera mu kukamula bwange. Kaakati ku ssaawa eno ndi bulungi. Akagambo ke mbawa bagende mu maaso tebaggwaamu maanyi, beetabe mu PBM, bagende mu maaso bajja kufuna nabo beeyongereko nga nze bwe neeyongeddeko. Naye ng'okusookera ddala neebaza pulezidenti waffe Museveni. Tweyanziza ne mukyala munnaffe Zulufa, naye mwebaza nnyo, beebale nnyo, beebale ddala kuba baasobola otunoonya ne batuyigga wonna we tuli, ssaawa yonna nga bakufaako ne bakubira akasimu ne bakuyita. Tweyanziza nnyo, tweyanziige kuba gye batujje wala. Ne bakyala bannange bagende maaso tebaggwaamu maanyi, baba bayise nga banguwako, tebaggwaamu maanyi. Ekyo kye mbasaba. Naye bannaye Museveni yeebale nnyo, yeebalire ddala kuba atujje wala nnyo, atujje wala. Tubadde bubi nga siina yadde omutwalo okusobola okusuulayo akasooda nkongeremu. Kabuliramu ekyokulya ne kibula, abaana bansaba mmere nga sirina. Naye yeebale nnyo, yeebalire ddala.
Amanya gange nze Tibitwa Ruth, ntunda mudaala. Kusooka twaliwo nga tukola naye COVID bwe yajja netukosaamu kapito neggwawo yo nekendeera, era bubaddewo nga butonootono. Okwewola mbadde sineewola nga nkyaliko nga ntunda obwo bwe nnina, ssente bwe nazifunye ninyongeramu, ninyongeramu ku nnyaanya eziwerako, ningulayo enkota za bogoya, ningula kale keddo, ninyongeramu ebintu awo nga bw'obiraba. Kuba bubadde butono nnyo. Bizinensi ejja kutambula kubanga ssente sinazifuna nti oba maze emyezi, sinakola myezi ntindaba amagoba oba biki, nakatandika wiiki nga 2. Ekintu ekyo bwe nakiwulira kyanzizaamu amaanyi kuba nawulira nga amagoba matono. Tebijja kunkubya puresha nnyo kuba bw'oba obazeemu ssente ez'amagoba, bw'oba owulira oba ozijja mu banka ssente nnyingi nnyo. Naye okugamba nti akakade oteekemu $60,000 kyampa amaanyi nindaba nti nja kumalako. Bakyala bannange kye mbagamba kwewaayo. Bizinensi bw'oba ogitandise ne bw'oba osigazzaako nusu mutwalo gumu, gumiikiriza oba oliawo nga Katonda alina kyaleese. Era kino ekintu Katonda ye yakireeta ng'akiyisiza mu pulezidenti waffe n'atuwayo ssente zino, n'agamba abantu bange babonaabona mu COVID kambaweeyo kasente kano basobole okwenunula. Babeere bagumiikiriza ate babeeremu n'essuubi gwe batanatuukako, naye nkya bajja kumutuukako oluusi.
In a nation hungry for truth, a world where every story matters, there exists a beacon of trust and reliability. For decades, they've been our voice and our window to the world, holding the mirror of our history. With 4 TV stations and 11 radio channels spanning 27 languages, they stand as guardians of information, defenders of truth. With Mascari Heritage Advantage, they uphold every citizen's right to reliable and free information. Their archive stories shaped our past and illuminate our present. Yet now, as new challenges arise and the world evolves, their mission faces its greatest test yet. Be part of our journey and let's navigate the unknown, uncover the untold, and safeguard our future together. Tune into your public broadcaster, for it is the intersection of trust and truth. Because to UBC, your story, and every voice matters. UBC, inspiring Uganda.
UBC, inspiring Uganda.
Form. And the latest one is, of course, Turkey, who Ankara basically saying that yes, they want to be a full-on member. They want to be a full member of BRICS, despite being a NATO ally and despite being part of this US-dominated worldview, something that BRICS aims to challenge. And this is why it is so valuable for the countries of